Hey, my name is Lily Zheng. I'm an out queer Chinese American trans woman, and I'm an entrepreneur.
Hello, Out Bosses! Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, we are welcoming Lily Zheng, who is calling us from California. Lily is based out of Mountain View, California. So, Lily, welcome to the show. I am super excited that you are here. Are you ready to inspire fellow out entrepreneurs?
Hell yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. So just a little bit about Lily before we get going. She is an organizational consultant, executive coach, and diversity and inclusion expert who works with organizations to turn positive intentions into positive impact. I love that. She works to create just, inclusive, and innovative workplaces for her clients through data-driven assessments, strategic advising, training, collaborative content creation, and more. A dedicated changemaker and advocate, she has co-authored multiple books and has had her work published in the New York Times, Quartz at Work, Entrepreneur, and HR Executive. And Lily, I love the title of one of your books, Gender Ambiguity in the Workplace, and I'm looking forward to talking about that with you. To kick off the interview, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your business and what makes it unique?
Sure thing. As you so kindly introduced me, I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant or an organizational consultant, depending on who you ask. And, well, my work mostly concerns going into organizations that really care about topics like diversity and inclusion, but are struggling to create actual change, to create actual impact for their employees of color, for women, for disabled folks, for LGBTQ plus folks. And as a consultant, what I do is I go in and for most of my clients, I help them understand what's going on, what's working well, and what's not really working well. Sometimes the way that I describe my job is I go in, I tell them where the fire is, I help people put out their fires, and I give them a fire extinguisher so they don't have to call me next time. That's really my day job these days. I go in and I help these organizations get better, to actually do DE&I work well. It's such a hard landscape in, the world after Me Too. And as we're reckoning with all of these topics of equity, racial justice, gender liberation, et cetera. And I just see my work as helping organizations do it right.
So I'm really grateful for the work that you're doing as a fellow DEI practitioner. It's big. Like you said, the landscape is pretty massive, and there are a lot of challenges that are going on right now in workplaces all across the country, globally. I'm curious from where you are, what's a common trend that you're seeing right now that's popping up for your clients? And how are you providing them solutions, like through just kind of these common challenges that are popping up? The audience here are a lot of small business owners who may not have the budgets of Google or some of the tech giants that you're probably working with in Silicon Valley. So, as you share this, kind of keep in mind that these small businesses really want to create inclusive cultures. And so, maybe some tips for smaller businesses as well.
Absolutely. I love working with smaller businesses because it turns out the most powerful solutions don't actually involve millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. So it's right up my alley. But I would say the most common trend that I've seen, so there's one or two. The first one I'm going to talk about is how organizations today are more focused than ever about not messing up, about not going through a PR scandal, not saying something wrong on social media. They're really concerned about the optics of D&I. That's because it impacts their bottom line, right? If you do something that's all over the news, that affects your stock value. That affects public perception of you. It's just, bad PR. I see one of the biggest problems as companies care a lot about the visibility of DE&I, but they don't necessarily understand the actual impact, the actual policies, the actual outcomes that they're trying to create. And so I will often work with companies that have their social media just spot on, right? They're saying all the right things, they're doing all the right things, but it turns out inside that company, things actually aren't great for women. Things aren't great for people of color, for URMs, the underrepresented minorities. And so bridging that gap between having good DEI optics and having good DEI outcomes is the biggest problem.
Mm-hmm.
The second trend that I'd like to point out is I think leaders are in a position where they know they have to do something about DEI, but they don't know what that something is. And so as a result, most of the clients that I work with, these companies are not places where leaders know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
So there's silence from the top. And as a result, there's significant problems down the line because employees don't feel like they're supported. They don't feel like leadership has their back. When they look toward the representation inside the C-suite or the board of the organization, all they see is a lineup of Christian, white, heterosexual, cisgender men. Mm-hmm. And that has a powerful negative impact on the retention rate, on employee morale, and on internal DEI change-making efforts because people just don't feel like they're seen. People aren't heard, people aren't seen, and this causes like genuine problems inside most of the organizations that I've been working with.
Yeah, I love kind of your analysis here. And the fact that businesses are being more proactive has to give you a lot of energy, right? Where rather than coming to you after things have gone sideways and potential lawsuits, at minimum, at least leaders know, hey, we have to call Lily because we don't know what we don't know and we need to do something. Right. So it's really different than say 10, 20 years ago, right? And yet the interesting thing that I see is like not having the vision of what kind of culture you want to create. And it's just so wild to me, right? If you wanted to overhaul your IT system, right, you would know what success looks like at the end. So I love that you're pushing, these leaders to really think about the impact and get clear on that before starting, a bunch of tactics that may not lead to the kind of change that is really going to be meaningful for historically underrepresented, undervalued talent, right? And that other piece of like seeing it to be it is so important. And I like that you're kind of pointing that out to leaders in terms of other things that they should be thinking of in terms of leadership development and pipeline and all that good stuff. In terms of, our LGBT business owners, you're deep in the world of DEI. So like what's one thing they might need to know about creating more inclusive cultures for their own small businesses that they may not know right now, even though they're a part of the Rainbow family and there is some understanding of feeling different? What's some other things that they should know as they're thinking about building their culture?
Support and vulnerability from the top is powerful, and best of all, it's free. Right? You don't have to put in hundreds of thousands of dollars to just tell your employees that at the very least you care, you see them, you support them. And sure, it sounds like it's a quick throwaway sentence, but these types of communications have an incredible effect on the organization. And I think many leaders don't realize that. They say, oh, well, it's not going to change the world if I just say a sentence or two, and I don't want to mess up. So the risk, outweighs the benefits. But it's actually quite the opposite. Employees are hungry to hear this sort of support from their leadership. So if there's one thing that I can say to leaders, it's be vulnerable, it's be authentic, and admit your own process, right? All of us are learning every day about this sort of work. And so people aren't looking at you to be perfect and to say all the right words, do all the right things. They're looking to engage with you as a human and as a person that cares about them and is invested in them as people and not just the bottom line.
Yeah, that it just hits on the power of storytelling, really providing support to leaders on how they can share their own story, how they entered this work, and just letting that be an organic conversation where they have a lot of confidence in sharing it with their people. And I love that you were reminding leaders of engage with your people as they are humans. We're not yet robots, right? And so I think that that's so valuable. And, like you said, that's not where you're spending millions and millions of dollars, right? I mean, that's just getting clear on how to share a story and how to communicate. Real simple. I really like that. In terms of thinking about, you're focused on working with clients and making an impact. And so I'm curious for you, when you're working with your clients, how do you measure your own success? Like, how do you know at the end of an engagement, you feel really good walking away and you've given them the fire extinguisher so that they can continue putting out their own fires in the future?
Right. So this is a really tough one. I think metrics are one of the most hotly debated topics in this field. How do you actually measure success? And given that I work as a sole proprietor and I'm working on my own, I often don't have the means to collect and process large amounts of data, right? Or at least large amounts of quantitative data. And so what I do for my own practice is I like to follow up with some of the folks that I've talked to during the process. I like to basically check in several months after I finished work with a client and just ask how things feel, how things have changed, how things have not changed. And to be frank with you, sometimes the answer is things haven't changed at all. And, that means that whatever it is that we tried, we put our best foot forward and it didn't work out. And that is one of the outcomes of consulting, right? That is one of the potential outcomes of doing this work. And I think, of course, as a consultant, it's difficult to grapple with the fact that sometimes you can't always get it right. But I think it's crucial as we continue developing out this field to recognize that this is a community of practice. And all of us are doing this work, not because consultants have your one-size-fit-all answers, but because consultants are practitioners that are doing their best to work inside these organizations to fix them. And that's difficult. That's really hard. So if the organization, hasn't changed in the way that we've wanted, sometimes I go back to clients and I say, hey, this is sort of what I've seen. Is this similar to what you've seen? Should we keep on working on this? Do we need to do some more work on this? What was the impact of the intervention we tried? How did that campaign work out? And what did we learn from it? At the end of the day, right, if you're not learning, that's a problem. But I think failure is itself a really powerful form of learning, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And on this show, we talk a lot about failure as proof points of course correcting so that you can end up at your long-term goal. You can see that
I'm
success.
completely with you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that taking that into the business of diversity, equity, and inclusion, what you're doing, number one, I really appreciate your honesty in sharing, your own process of going back to clients after an engagement, several months down the road, and being open to hearing a client saying, you know what, we don't see the change that we thought we were going to get. And some of it is, like you said, this is a community of practice where there's a lot of promising ideas, and we're still in the midst of, walking away to say, this is the surefire way of how to do it. And I don't think that we'll ever arrive at that, right? But then there's also this element, and I would love to kind of pick your brain on this, of some of this is a discipline, right? You're giving some tools to employers on, here's some strategies, we've identified some of the challenges, please implement them, right? Is there a way when you kind of return back and having these conversations where you're assessing too, did they do the things that they said they were going to do to get that change? Because that's a challenge too of did you do the things that, we were talking about or not? Do you find that they're pretty transparent about that, or does it take a little bit of kind of coaxing that information out to get a better assessment of whether they're doing the things?
So this is a toughie, and this is one of the challenges of doing consulting work as an outsider, as opposed to being someone embedded inside that organization already. What I've found is that for organizations that have a lot of transparency, for organizations that are already most of the way there by the time I get there, you do see a lot of transparency. But the organizations that are not there yet also tend to be those organizations that are not going to tell me that they're not there yet. And so to me, it looks on its surface like everyone is fine, that everything worked, but it's very difficult to suss out which organizations are the ones that actually had some challenges, but the clients who paid me for my labor maybe are not willing to, or maybe are not even able, that some of the things, they just might not even know that some of the things didn't work. And so that's really tough. And it's not a problem that I think I've got figured out yet, right? This is why it's important to partner with people inside of these organizations for the long term, to actually say, I'm not here just to provide a one and done service, right? I'm here to actually help you and partner with you on this. And you have nothing to gain by hiding things from me, right? So rather than putting myself just as, I'm here to do my standard workshop on so-and-so, right? I try to position myself as someone that is genuinely trying to help, and you're paying me not because I can teach a workshop for 1 hour, but because I have genuine skills and knowledge that you would benefit from partnering with.
Right. I completely agree with that. And I think building those relationships inside and building that trust is when you can get a real honest assessment of, yeah, you gave us a lot of really, really good ideas and we were really committed in implementing them. Here's where things went a little sideways because we didn't have the resources or we didn't have the leadership support. You'll get more of that kind of honest assessment of what happened after you left, for that engagement, and the fact that they're calling you or you're calling them to come back in and continue that ongoing relationship. So really, really good stuff. We're talking a lot about your clients and their cultures and inside their workplaces. And I'm curious, as a sole practitioner, as you're building out your own practice, your own business, what are some things that you're doing to really kind of walk your talk and building a more inclusive business, and your vision for how you're going to kind of create this culture moving forward?
For my own business. One practice that I have been doing over the last few months is I take the first 2 days of each month, right? So the first and the second, to look into any new research in the field, any new research in the field of DEI work, of organizational psychology, of organizational sociology, anything. I have probably 20 or 25 journals that I follow. And I do this so that I can keep my work relevant. This practice really springs from an experience I had one day where I was chatting with an older DEI practitioner who was a leader in their field decades ago. And it turned out some of their ideas about how things worked and how change happened didn't actually reflect the research that I was aware of. And after talking to them a little more, I learned that they were still practicing under the same framework that they had learned and that they had made a business out of decades earlier. And that was a huge wake-up call for me because I don't want to be like that. I want to make sure that the things I'm telling clients reflect the most up-to-date knowledge we have about what's going on and what works. As a writer and as an author, I'm lucky enough to have a lot of experience moving on from ideas that no longer work, right? That's something that all writers have to do. You have to kill your darlings. And sometimes, your darlings are ideas that you're deeply invested in, right? Ideas that you really, really support and you think are just going to work for everyone. And then you see research out there that says, actually, this doesn't work for this group of people, or this isn't effective. And I've had to go through that experience a couple of times of letting go of different practices, letting go of different frameworks that no longer serve me or serve the communities that I'm trying to serve. And that continuous process of growth is something that I want to sustain throughout my entire career, right? I never want to feel like I'm stagnant.
Yes, that's such great advice. It's this remaining relevant requires doing the work and being open to new ideas and ideas that can challenge, like you said, the frameworks that you might be your go-to or were.
Right.
And being willing to say, you know what, I can see the value of this new way of thinking, or this is a value add on top of a framework that I'm already using, and it becomes more powerful, right? And I think it goes back to what you were saying of a community of practitioners, a community of practice. I love that. And I think that's valuable. We're deep into talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I think more broadly as business owners who are tuning in, I think there's probably a lot of head nodding happening of oh yeah, I see that. I've been there in my own field of whatever that field might be. I really love that advice. So Lily, we're going to jump to a quick sponsorship break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about what brings you to the Rainbow family. Hey, Outbosses, Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBT entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business. To know that you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting business. In fact, I'm on a mission to empower leaders just like you and those on their way to joining us to cultivate cultures of belonging. In my upcoming book, Belonging at Work, I share some of my personal struggles of coming out as a trans guy in the workplace and how I leverage this experience as one of my business superpowers. Now, I'm on a mission to support you in taking simple actions that will make a world of difference for anyone who has ever felt as if they needed to hide important aspects of themselves on the job. When you commit to purchasing a special, limited edition copy of the book, a portion of your purchase will support expanding workplace opportunities for fellow transgender and non-binary people. An added bonus, your story about what it means to belong at work will be featured on the book's website to inspire others. You're ready to belong at work now. To learn more, visit rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type the word belong. Again, that's rhodesonamazon.com or text 444-999 and type belong. Okay, so Lily, we are jumping back into the conversation, and I wanted to talk a little bit about what brings you to the Rainbow family in the context of work. And I guess we didn't really talk about your origin story. So I guess the first question before we jump into the Rainbow family aspect is, have you ever worked for someone else, or have you always been your own boss?
Yeah, of course I've worked for somebody else. I feel like it's really difficult to start off like this. So the origin story of my business, or the origin story of my overall career?
Well, I just wanted to know if you worked for someone else. And so you have. So
I have.
Awesome. Cool. And the reason why I asked that is because chances are in your own business, you're creating a really amazing, inclusive culture. I'm wondering, when you worked for someone else, if there was ever a time where you felt that you couldn't be 100% yourself, there was some aspect of being a part of the Rainbow family that you felt like you had to cover or just not talk about at all. And if you
covering.
if you can draw on one of those experiences, share a little bit about what was going on and how you were able to kind of work around that challenge.
Yeah, so one of my first jobs was working within a university setting as a staff member. That was really difficult for me because one of the responsibilities of our work, or rather one of the unspoken norms of our work, was that we had to put distance between ourselves and the students that we were trying to serve. And so the idea, right, is if you get mistaken as a student, that's bad. You need to make sure that students know that they are here and that you are there. Mm-hmm. And putting that amount of distance between myself and the student community was really difficult. One, because authenticity to me did not necessarily look like conservative office wear. If you know me in person, I don't dress like that. That's not my vibe. And that was kind of the dress code right at the office. And it's a minor thing, right? It's not like we had to wear dresses every day, but the unspoken norms of that office were definitely more formal than I was comfortable with. And given that I was, working as a practitioner and working with these students, sometimes it doesn't actually serve you if students don't feel like they can trust you. If you have to put on the uniform of the scary university administrator. And I definitely got comments about my appearance while I was working there. Just a few tisk. Why are you wearing that? Why'd you cut your hair like that? Like, students do that. You're not supposed to do that. You're not a student. That was really difficult for me. Yeah. Some other experiences, I think just working as an out trans woman is really difficult sometimes. Yeah. Just dealing with other people's assumptions about you, being misgendered, and whether it's students that are doing the misgendering or colleagues that are doing the misgendering or supervisors that are doing the misgendering. It's just kind of it was an experience that I had to get used to, and I resented the fact that I had to get used to it. And, as a sole proprietor now, I don't work with anyone who misgenders me, right? And my clients are very aware that I am trans and that this is an important part of my identity, and you're going to treat me with respect or you're not going to work with me. And that's just kind of one and done. It's never come up as an issue. And I've noticed that I've gotten misgendered way less after working for myself because I'm allowed to set my own boundaries, and I'm allowed to tell people that things are okay or not okay, and they listen to me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think that contrast is so important. And I think it speaks to the power that comes with being your own business owner, which not everyone has, right? And so the fact that, you're speaking real truth to the realities of, being trans or being non-binary in the workplace, and just that reality of people, whether intentionally, hopefully not, or unintentionally, just because they don't know what they don't know, just how painful that could be, even if it happens just once, right? But the fact that, like what you said, you just have to get used to it. That's just so much of your energy that could be dedicated to better serving students is really just kind of self-protecting, I mean, you're
Hmm.
spending how much time do you want to spend on a colleague if they continue to mess up just basic things about the pronoun that you use or your name. So I appreciate you sharing that. And in those settings, because I know that there are some people that are listening and they haven't yet busted out and started their own business. They're still working for someone else. For trans folks in particular, non-binary folks who are listening and maybe in those situations working for someone else, do you have any advice on how they can kind of continue to keep their jobs and still like set some professional boundaries, like you said, to just kind of remind people like, hey, I'm Rhodes, I use male pronouns or like whatever. Any
Yeah.
advice on that?
Yeah. I'm gonna give some micro level advice and then some higher level advice.
Yeah.
So in terms of micro level things, I would say one of the most effective things I can recommend, even though it's not easy, is to start off your relationship with a workplace by setting those boundaries. By anchoring them, there's a concept in social psychology called the anchoring effect, whereby you just say, this is who I am, it's my first day here, I use these pronouns, this is what I expect from folks, and that's that, rather than doing it a month or two in. Because waiting that long can feel like the safer thing to do, but what you sacrifice by doing that is other people have already had plenty of opportunities to build a mental image of you. And shifting someone's mental image is much harder than starting off with something that feels more authentic. Now, that being said, the higher level advice that I can give, I wrote a book, right? Gender Ambiguity in the Workplace. And one of the most clear cut findings was that trans people's experience in the workplace is almost solely dependent on the level of supportiveness from their manager.
Hmm.
And to describe more about this, trans people with supportive managers, even in an organization that was not great, had a good experience. However, trans people who had unsupportive managers, even if the organization was really good, actually had pretty negative experiences despite things like non-discrimination policy, things like transition policy. The manager was sort of the sole decider of how good an experience is. So I would say my second bit of advice for trans people inside organizations is really try to understand how supportive your current manager is. And if they are supportive, feel free to do all the things that you need to do to advocate for yourself. And if they're not, consider either getting a transfer to a new manager or taking care of yourself and lying low. This is one of the bits of advice that's hard to give for me, but I sincerely believe in the safety of trans people taking priority. I think being safe is more important than being quote unquote authentic. And that's, of course, very hard to say as someone who's out myself. But, I don't want the trans community to face discrimination that threatens their careers. I don't want the trans community to face sexual assault or violence. And let's be real, not every workplace is going to be safe for every person. And sometimes going back in the closet is the right thing to do. It's never fun advice to give, but that's what I believe.
Yeah, yeah, and it's real. I mean, the realities of safety. I think for you, I think for someone like me, there's a real privilege of being able to be out as a trans person because the
Right.
reality is it's 2019 and there's still a really long way to go before people don't have to fear violence or, like you said, sexual assault on the job. I mean, that's just the realities of where we are. And I love that you were able to talk about your book, Gender Ambiguity in the Workplace. I am definitely picking up a copy because I love I love this, like the micro advice that you shared about this anchoring effect and setting expectations in advance if you can. I mean, I'm sure there's some folks who
Mm-hmm.
are tuning in where it's like, but I transitioned on the job. What do I do? So pick up the book because I don't think we're going to be able to get through all of the great advice that you can share on this particular topic. And I do like what you were saying about the level of support of management. I mean, it goes to like anybody who's tuning into the show right now. If you've ever worked for someone else and if you ever have left a job, you're leaving the people that you're working for, not necessarily the mission of the organization or,
Yep.
so it's
People quit managers.
exactly. And I think that makes sense, when we're just talking about, trans folks in the workplace and is your manager supportive or not? And you can probably tell pretty quickly, yeah, doing some of that research in advance before sharing too much about your gender history that might make you unsafe. So I really appreciate all of that guidance and information. So definitely check out Gender Ambiguity in the Workplace. So on this kind of note of what brings you to the Rainbow family, the workplace, all that good stuff, we know with our lived experiences, being a part of the Rainbow family, there are some pretty unique things that we have. This kind of for all of us, the experience, if we've ever come out at some point, it's pretty unique. So I'm wondering, Lily, from your perspective, all of the lived experiences that you've had as someone who's an out trans person, do you see any of those experiences as being superpowers, like the gifts of the journey that allow you to stand out as a business owner? And if so, can you share a little bit of your views of your own superpowers and how you leverage them in your business?
Absolutely. So probably the biggest, let's call it a superpower that I've picked up in the course of my own journey is recognizing how people can change in a physical and literal sense because gender transition, but also, on a deeper level, on an emotional level. I've seen people who genuinely, were, I would say, hateful and ignorant and prejudiced really come around because of, their experience knowing a trans person or having a trans family member. And this ties in really strongly to my belief in transformative justice, basically linking all of the prejudices and the problems in our society to these larger systems, whether they be patriarchy, whether they be white supremacy, whether they be, institutionalized, I guess I said racism already, but neocolonialism, all the big things, right? All the isms, basically linking the day-to-day experiences of folks as inside these systems. And by understanding that these systems exist and that these systems shape people, it's really given me, I think, more empathy for folks that are at a different point in their process. One of the things that I like to say is hurt people, right? This quote didn't come from me. I saw it on the internet somewhere. But I try never to respond to ignorance by shutting it out, right? By shutting it down, by saying, great, then you said a bad thing, therefore you're a bad person, therefore I'll never interact with you again, therefore I want you out of my life. Rather, I've tried to approach it from, okay, so you said this thing that's harmful. We need to address the harm that's been done. Sure. And I have this curiosity of trying to figure out why. Like, why is it that you've said this? What ideas about gender have you learned growing up in your life that lead you to be uncomfortable with trans people? What does this have to do with your own understanding of masculinity and femininity? What does this have to do with your family situation growing up? And trying to take this perspective has been really good for me. It's been good for my mental health. It's been good for my work. It's been a really powerful way to approach these problems, not from a standpoint of blame and shame, but from a standpoint of how can we help people grow and learn and undo some of these negative systems together. And I think that's something that being out as trans for so long and carving my own space in the world, but also seeing other people around me grow has been, it's just been really powerful to have gone through that experience. And I think it informs a lot of my work.
Yeah, I really appreciate what you're talking about in bringing people in, addressing harm if someone doesn't realize what they're saying is harmful, and being open and curious to understand how that belief got shaped, and not to reduce someone down to a personal belief or something that they said as, like you said, just kind of writing them off completely and kind of equating their behavior with who they are. I truly believe, it's probably why we do the work that we do, but that's where that kind of transformation comes in, that you're able to hang with them. And I think it definitely helps with the work, because the more curious you get, the more things that you hear over and over again, that allows you to write about it, right? Like that could be your next book, which I will be excited to read, right? Because that helps us all get better at what we do and try to find effective ways of building bridges to connect more with people that are different than us. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And appreciating too, the more that we can connect with people and just humanize being trans, right? Because so many people still, I think it's like less than 20% know someone who is trans or works with someone who's trans. So I think the more that we get out there and just kind of, this is who we are, we're here. And, there's a face to a community of people. It's an empathy builder. It bridges empathy gaps, right? I appreciate what you're saying so much. So, considering some of these challenges that pop up in the workplace and the superpowers that you've just named, what's one way, for listeners keeping safety in mind where they can show up more authentically, either as business owners or as employees working for someone else? Any ideas on that?
Ways in which they can show up more authentically
In their work.
This is a tough question for me because I feel like many people are already showing up as authentically as they are able.
Mm-hmm.
And the question here, right, is how able are you to show up authentically? How safe is it to show up authentically? And I think many of us are not as authentic as we would like to be in the workplace because we worry that there's going to be some repercussion for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We might not know for sure that someone's going to treat us poorly, but we're making a trade-off in our heads of authenticity versus security. And I'm not sure I can answer this question because I actually trust every individual to make the right choice for them about the right balance between authenticity and security.
Yeah.
If anything, I would say to help people show up at work more authentically, we need to have people feel safer at work to begin with. So this actually becomes an organizational question of how can we make our workplaces safer so that individuals can choose to show up in however they want. That's what I think is the big question here, because I'm never going to ask someone to show up more authentically than they want to. In fact, the whole concept of authenticity is kind of convoluted. I would say that we have multiple authenticities.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I don't bring my full self to work, but the idea that you have to be your quote unquote full self all the time, I'm not sure if I believe in that because we have so many selves, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have so many selves in so many settings. For example, with my family, I feel like I'm very authentic around my family, but some of my friends would disagree with that. They would say, you are totally different around them. And I'm like, exactly, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's code switching. It's being who I need to be to thrive in the moment. And I know many trans people and many queer folks that do the same in the workplace. The challenge comes when people want to be one way and they can't.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that's just about removing barriers. How do we create our workplaces in ways that are safer for folks of all genders and folks of all sexualities? How can we teach managers to be less unintentionally shitty or intentionally shitty towards people of color and queer folks and trans folks and women, et cetera? And I don't really have the answer to all that. I mean, the book has some of them, but it's something that we're working on every day, right? Like we are trying to answer this question for everyone so that we can all show up as authentically as we want to be at work.
Yes. And I think you're the first guest that I've had who's flipped the frame of talking about the system of the workplace rather than the individual and placing that burden on the individual. So kind of really challenging workplaces to consider how do you create more safety, trust, and belonging so that your people can just be and do the thing that you hired them to do. And you're valuing them and their differences. Those are strengths, right? So I think we will get there. We're not there yet, but that's why we do the work. Yeah. So Lily, I have just a few more questions for you. And the first is thinking about our audience. There's a lot of folks who are tuning in who have not yet taken the leap to become their own boss. Mm-hmm. They're interested in it. I'm curious, do you have any advice for those folks that are just really kind of wrestling with, okay, do I stay or do I start my own thing? Like, what would you share with them just to inspire them to take that first step?
I would say start doing both. I don't think there's any reason. Okay, well, there's plenty of reasons, time and money, right? But if you're able to, I think the hardest work of becoming your own boss is getting yourself off the ground. And something that helps is to have security while you're taking that step. So if you already have a job, then you have that security. You have that safety if things don't work out. I would encourage folks to just go out and start doing it. Don't quit your job, of course. Don't quit your job until you really believe in the work that you're doing and that the time is better spent with your business. But you should network. You should go out there. You should talk to folks. You should go to conferences. If the challenge of starting off from scratch is scaring you, then you just don't have to do it. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can still work in your job and you can start building your own brand. You can start posting things on social media. You can start writing down your thoughts. If thought leadership is something that interests you, you can create a product prototype. You can test it with friends. These are all things that you can do while you have a job, and the income you're getting from that job will be great security for you. I did not do that and regret it a little bit. I quit my job and then immediately started trying to start a small business. And as any business owner will tell you, it takes a while to get off the ground. So I really struggled a bit in the first few months, and I definitely relied on the folks around me to help support during that time. But, unless the job is really bad for you, I would recommend that you start off while you still have that job.
Yeah, I think that's very, very good advice. It's almost kind of like, not to infantilize anyone, but it's kind of like the training wheels that on the business idea that you have, and that support, that security is really important if there's more than a healthy dose of fear, because I don't think the fear is ever going to go away. It's just something you can,
Oh, no, it doesn't.
yeah, you can become friends with.
I'm still terrified.
Yeah. I mean, that's part. That's when you're growing. If you're a little uncomfortable, that's where the magic's happening, right? So, Lily, this has been awesome. I really have enjoyed getting to know you and learning about your business. Can you let our audience know the best way to find you and to learn more about what you do, read your book, all that good stuff?
Sure thing. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, I think that's all of them. At Lily Zheng 308. That is LILYZHENG 308. You can also find me at my website, lilyzheng.co, lilyzheng.co. That's where I'm at.
Awesome. Lily, thank you so much for your time and for inspiring so many outbosses tuning into the show. It's been awesome. So for outbosses, everyone tuning in right now, thank you so much for being with us on this week's episode. It's always a privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring bosses like Lily. So for details from today's conversation, please visit outentrepreneur.com. That's where you'll find all of the great links that Lily just shared. You can get your own copy of Gender Ambiguity in the Workplace. And if you haven't yet already, please subscribe to the show and let me know how I'm doing. Let me know what you like about the show. Let me know if there's a question that you would love for me to ask fellow guests. And for everyone, please continue to be your authentic selves 100% of the time. Thanks so much.